It's been a while since we've had to take a look at the Australian Jewish Democratic Society, but they have raised their ugly anti-Israel head once again, and once again they deserve to be roundly condemned. Their latest stunt is billed as a Jewish discussion on the boycott, divestment and sanctions movement, which in itself is not necessarily a taboo subject. But with the hard left AJDS, anything that they do is anti-Israel and pro-Palestinian. In fact, this organisation is so far left that it actively engages with and endorses the anti-Israel propaganda of the Palestinian and Muslim lobby. If you are not familiar with this small group of self-hating Jews, here is a snapshot of some of their policies. The AJDS enthusiastically partners with people and groups that are openly hostile to Israel. And, as with this event, the AJDS will happily share a platform with anybody who questions Israel's right to exist as a Jewish state and who is often associated with blatant anti-Semitism. It has more in common with the Palestinian cause than Israel and is much closer to a Palestinian lobby group than a Jewish one. How they remain an affiliate of the JCCV beggars belief, but more on that later. The Australian Jewish Democratic Society website states that it believes the policies of occupation in East Jerusalem, the West Bank and Gaza violate the human rights of Palestinians, undermine the fragile state of democracy in Israel, and promote despair and violence. Presumably that explains how the AJDS justifies Muslim and Arab violence everywhere in the world. The Gazan Great March of Return started 9 months ago at the border with Israel. And we all know that it is nothing but a carefully designed plan to draw Israel into a violent conflict and in doing so advance the Palestinian cause diplomatically. But the AJDS won't have a bar of it. They believe that it is essentially a popular and non-violent protest that was greeted with a violent and deadly response by Israel. The AJDS demanded that at the time that Israel stop the shooting of unarmed protesters, end the siege of the Gaza Strip, and commence good faith discussions with the Palestinians to end the occupation and colonisation of the Palestinian territories and promote a life of hope, dignity and security for both peoples. These people are living in fairyland, and I'm yet to see them demand that the Palestinian Arabs stop stabbing and shooting Israeli citizens or enter good faith discussions with Israel. In order to end the Israel-Palestinian conflict, one of the most basic conditions that Israel asks of its Palestinian neighbours is that it be recognised as the nation state of the Jewish people. But the AJDS has a problem with that, and in my interpretation of their position, would rather see a binational state for all peoples living in divine bliss from the river to the sea. The Australian Jewish Democratic Society objected to PM Netanyahu's visit to Australia, and they take a special interest in advocating for refugees. You know, we were once strangers in the land, as it is quoted in the Torah. But funny, as refugees, Jews didn't complain about having their feelings hurt and didn't run around stabbing people because they felt alienated. They just knuckled down and got on to work. The latest event of the AJDS is a so-called Jewish community discussion. But take a look at the 4 speakers. All women, by the way, no men. I am so highly offended by this female misandrist aggression. Anyway, first up is a well-known Palestinian activist, playwright and denier of Israel's right to exist, Samar Sabawi. Spouting every lie in the world about Israel is not beyond the pale for this woman. In 2016, she got one of her plays into the VCE curriculum. It portrays Israel as a bloodthirsty, evil war machine. It must have been a real shocker because at least some Jewish organisations had the decency to protest about it. Then there is Geordie Silverstein, a committee member of the AJDS and hard left academic who focuses on refugees, gender issues and nationalism. She considers Israel to be a racist state and defends Palestinian Arab terrorists. Sahar Vardi is an Israeli peace activist who has served 3 prison sentences for her refusal to be conscripted into the Israeli military service. She also criticises, quote, the blind support of Israel by the US. And then there is Alex Fine of Gullus Australia fame. If you haven't come across her on Facebook, then you are indeed one of the lucky ones. She is a militant hard-left activist with a mouth like a sewer and is a master of the left's tactic of shouting down people she disagrees with. Many years ago, the AJDS applied for affiliation with the Jewish Community Council of Victoria and was accepted as being representative of a small but legitimate group of left-leaning Jews in our community. And I don't have a problem with that. Our community is big enough to tolerate views from all sides of the political spectrum. But there is a red line, and in recent years, the AJDS has regularly crossed it. It is one thing to be left-leaning in your advocacy for Israel, but quite another to be so hostile to the very concept of a Jewish state that you actively advocate for Israel's enemies, which is what the AJDS does. For years now, there has been discussion to expel the AJDS from this communal roof body organisation. But guess what? The leftist JCCV just can't bring themselves to do what most of the community knows should happen. The JCCV will quickly criticise the Australian Jewish Association, but then look the other way at the overtly anti-Israel activism of the Jewish hard left. This is the organisation that represents you, the Jewish community of Victoria. Is it any wonder that nobody takes them seriously anymore? This is Alan Friedman for the Australian Jewish Association.